Hey, welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is The Great Conversation. You know, sometimes history feels like a solid, settled thing. The past is past, the winners wrote the books, and the path we're on seems inevitable. But every so often, you stumble across a moment, a person, where everything teetered on a knife's edge, where the entire future of a civilization could have swerved in a radically different direction. I want to talk about one of those moments today. It takes us to the final, flickering days of the Byzantine Empire, to a crumbling Constantinople, and to a secretive old philosopher who almost convinced the last Christian emperors to abandon their faith and resurrect the gods of ancient Greece. This is episode 42, Byzantium's Last Philosopher, how Gemistos Plethon almost restored paganism. So picture this. It's the early 1400s. Constantinople, the grand capital of the Roman Empire in the East for 1,000 years, is a shadow of itself. It's surrounded, squeezed by the rising Ottoman Empire. The walls are still strong, but the spirit is weary. In the halls of power and in the great church of Hagia Sophia, there's a desperate feeling. People are asking, how did we get so weak? What did we do to lose God's favor? And into this atmosphere of crisis steps a thinker from the Byzantine outpost of Mistra, near ancient Sparta. His name was George Gemistos, but he took another name for himself, Plethon, a deliberate, audacious echo of Plato. This wasn't just a scholarly nickname. It was a declaration of war on 1,000 years of orthodox thought. Plethon was old, by the standards of the time, in his 70s, and he carried with him a vision not of a Christian future, but of a pagan past. He had studied the classics, Plato and Plotinus and the Stoics, not as historical curiosities, but as living truth. He came to believe that Byzantine Christianity, with its mystical otherworldliness, had sapped the empire's civic and military virtue. To save Hellenic civilization, which is how he saw Byzantium's core identity, they needed to return to its original spiritual source, the pagan, polytheistic system of the ancient philosophers, refined and systematized by him. Now, this wasn't some wild-eyed street preacher. Plethon was deeply respected, a towering intellectual figure. And in 1438, he got his biggest stage. The emperor, John VIII Palaiologos, desperate for military aid from the West against the Ottomans, agreed to attend a great council in Ferrara, and later Florence, to reunite the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. Theologians and scholars from Byzantium traveled to Italy for this monumental debate, and Plethon was among them. But his mind wasn't on mending the schism between Christian brothers. He saw a different opportunity. In the evenings, away from the official theological wrangling, Plethon held court. And his audience? The brightest minds of the Italian Renaissance. Young men like Cosimo de' Medici, the future ruler of Florence, and scholars hungry for the ancient Greek wisdom that Byzantium had preserved. Plethon lit a fire in them. He told them that Plato was greater than Aristotle, who was the standard in the West. He laid out a vision of a universal, rational religion based on the hierarchy of the old gods, Zeus as the supreme principle, with other gods representing his powers and virtues. It was a philosophical paganism, stripped of bloody sacrifice, focused on virtue, civic duty, and the worship of the cosmos itself. To these Renaissance humanists, this wasn't heresy. It was an electrifying revelation. It was the pure, lost wisdom of antiquity, speaking through this mysterious sage from the East. And here's where the story reaches its peak of what if. Plethon didn't just lecture the Italians. He wrote a secret, explosive document, a detailed blueprint for the radical reform of the Byzantine Empire, titled simply The Laws. In it, he outlined a complete pagan theocracy. The old calendar, the old festivals, the worship of the Olympian gods as cosmic principles, all under a philosopher king. He envisioned a Spartan-style social order, rigid and militaristic, designed for survival and virtue. He sent this text to the emperor himself. Think about the sheer, breathtaking audacity of that. With the Turks at the gates, pleading with the Pope for help, this philosopher hands the Christian emperor a plan to convert the empire back to the worship of Zeus. It's one of history's most astonishing Hail Mary passes. Of course, it didn't happen. The emperor, while perhaps intrigued, was a practical man. The laws were too dangerous. Plethon's most radical ideas remained secret, discussed in whispers. The Council of Florence achieved a paper reunion of the churches that ultimately failed. The Byzantines went home empty-handed. Plethon returned to Mistra, taught his students, and died a few years before Constantinople finally fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. Legend says his body was later moved to Italy, to the city of Rimini, where a Renaissance lord buried him in a tomb fit for a pagan sage. A final, ironic tribute. But the end of his life isn't the end of his story. This is where I find the real fascination. Because Plethon's legacy split in two, like a forked path. In the East, his direct influence died with Byzantium. His secret book, the Laws, was discovered after his death. The last Orthodox patriarch in Constantinople, Gennadios Scholarios, was so horrified he took the manuscript and burned it. Only fragments survived. In a way, Scholarios saw Plethon as a greater threat than the Ottoman Sultan Mehmet II, who was literally outside the walls. He understood that ideas can be more corrosive and more enduring than armies. But in the West, in that fertile ground of Italy, Plethon's seeds flourished wildly. The young Cosimo de' Medici was so inspired by Plethon's lectures on Plato that he founded the Platonic Academy in Florence, which became the engine of the Renaissance. Marsilio Ficino, its leading light, translated all of Plato's works into Latin because of Plethon's prompting. The Renaissance obsession with Neoplatonism, with reconciling ancient wisdom and Christian faith, with the dignity of man and the beauty of the cosmos, it flows directly from those evening talks in Ferrara and Florence. So the man who failed to paganize Byzantium succeeded, in a way, in paganizing, or at least profoundly classicalizing, the European Renaissance. He helped turn the West's gaze backward to antiquity, which in turn propelled it forward. I think about Plethon often, especially when I consider my own place, straddling worlds, between Bangladesh and New York, between engineering and storytelling. He was a man caught between worlds, too. Between a dying Christian empire and a pagan past he dreamed could be a future. Between the East that birthed him and the West that adopted his ideas. He reminds me that the flow of ideas is never straightforward. A thought suppressed in one place can bloom, unrecognizably, in another. His story is a testament to the dangerous, unpredictable power of a single, unwavering mind. He looked at the end of his world and dared to imagine building a completely different one from the ashes of the old. He wasn't on the right side of history, but he challenged what right even meant. He asked the most dangerous question of all. What if the foundational story we've been telling ourselves is wrong? What if our strength lies not in clinging tighter to our current truths, but in having the courage to reclaim an older, forgotten one? In that sense, Gemistos Plethon, the last philosopher of Byzantium, speaks to any age of crisis, any moment when the walls seem to be closing in, and the only path forward looks like a path back. Thanks for joining me for this journey into a forgotten turning point. If you enjoyed this episode of The Great Conversation, please do share it with someone who loves history's strange and pivotal moments. For more deep dives into the ideas that shaped our world, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This is Abnul J. Farabi for Light Not Studios. Until next time, keep listening and keep thinking.